All right, we're gonna get started, guys. We're gonna get started. Thank you guys for coming for the first rendition of AI After 5. In today's showcase, we have two fantastic speakers that'll be telling us about knowledge bases and skills. I'm personally really excited to hear what they have to share with us. And yeah, welcome. I'm going to give the floor to Akash, our lovely CEO, to give you guys a little bit of a spiel about Vellum and what we have going on.
Thank you, Garrison. Thank you, Shay. Thank you, Andrew, for coming by. Thank you, everyone, for showing up to our office for this event. I'll keep my spiel short because I'm not the main event here for sure. But a quick 30 seconds about us. If you check your name tags, it has two things. One is your name and your assistant's name. Most people were wondering when I was checking them in, what is this? What's the assistant name? Yes, there's no answer to this yet. But the world is changing. The AI industry is like moving really quickly. And my perspective on how it pans out now is that everyone will have a general purpose personal AI assistant or personal intelligence that can do things for them. That is theirs and is extremely personalized to how they work. That's what we're doing. We're building a general purpose AI intelligence product. And for me, like email, Slack, calendar is all basic stuff. But this does really cool things too. My co-founder sitting in that room, what he's building right now is having the assistant join your Zoom calls like Fathom would, but also like take in context and also participate in Zoom calls. That's pretty cool. I've had it build marketing videos for me, do data analysis, build slides, wipe code apps. It's proactive. It just does everything. I've churned off a lot of SaaS subscriptions. The whole point is that as models get better, you can have a single AI assistant do a lot more for you. That's what we're building. So thank you for coming. And you'll see how knowledge base and skills are helpful also in general while you're using something like this. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, Akash. And now for the first speaker, my lovely friend Shay will come up and tell us about how he built a knowledge base with Claude and Obsidian. And I'm not even going to explain more because that's his job. Come on up, Shay.
All right, thank you.
Let me get this. Boom, you should be good.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you to everyone that showed up. Thank you to Vellum for hosting me. This is so exciting. I'm going to be honest, when I signed up to do this, like Gary and Nick told me about it, and I thought about maybe a third of the people here would come. So this is kind of crazy to see all these people, to hear what I have to say and to hear what Andrew has to talk about as well. So my name is Shay. I went to UChicago, graduated in 2023. And while there, I founded a student-run music magazine called Firebird. And we have a few former members of Firebird in the room, which I'm so proud about. And I've spent my entire life listening to and loving music. And for the past 7 years, I've kept a series of spreadsheets, one for each year from 1954 to now 2026, tracking critical, commercial, and genre data on every album I've ever heard. So I'm going to hit 10,000 albums this year and EPs and mixtapes and stuff. So I listen to a lot of music. And I currently work in distressed M&A and restructuring. So this isn't quite my day job, but it is the thing that I care about the most. And so I want to start by telling you guys what this talk is not about. So it's not about productivity, which I think is usually the word that is at the front of everyone's mind when we talk about AI today, but it did start there. So for years, maintaining these spreadsheets was my main hobby. But then in January, I started using Claude Code and Cowork, and within a few weeks, I realized that these tools could automate about 90% of what I'd been doing by hand for the past 7 years. And so adding a new album, bulk updating genre data, making formatting changes across thousands of rows, all of that stuff was a few prompts away. And all of it was packaged into custom skills that I could reuse. So that sort of left me in a strange place. I'd figured out how to streamline the thing that I'd spent years building, and I was blown away. But the part that I loved so much about this hobby was how the processing of it all was what allowed me to get a bit closer to the music that I was listening to, and really consider my feelings about it. So, if AI could handle all the processing, then was I even really doing the thing anymore? So I made a choice. Instead of sitting back and just using this technology to do my hobby for me, I it made me want to build something that would have been impossible without it. Something that would take me deeper into the music that I love so much. So, I didn't use Claude to do something faster. I mean, I use it to do a lot of my work faster. Like, I feel like I barely have to work these days, which is so nice. But this wasn't about taking a shortcut or anything. Like a lot of the conversation about AI is about speed. It's about like, you know, how can we do things more efficiently? And then, of course, the pushback that we hear all the time is that speed can cheapen things. The shortcuts can produce worse work. The output is wrong or it's lacking in humanity. And so what I want to show you guys is a different story. This project that I've created would not exist without Claude. Like, I would not and could not have built it alone. The amount of research, like cross-referencing and writing is more than one person can sustain at the level of quality and rigor that I wanted. And the editorial vision that I've created for this project is also specific enough that delegating it to a large team of collaborators wouldn't quite work either. So the question was never like, how do I do this faster? It was more like, what becomes possible if I have a tool that lets me hold myself to a higher editorial standard than the standard that I could maintain on my own. And that's a fundamentally different value proposition from efficiency. That's rigor. And rigor is what the rest of this talk is going to be about. So before the map itself, which is the focus of this talk, I want to take a little detour to my spreadsheet. So they aren't separate from this project. They're more like the back end. Every album I've heard is here, tagged by genre according to the taxonomy of Rate Your Music, which is the internet's largest music database. And each row also has record label info, critic scores, and my own personal scores for each album. Which means that when I'm building the map, Claude has the context of every record I've heard and what I think of it. When I'm writing a note about an album that came out in 1966, the model knows which other records from the same year that I've heard, what genres they belong to, how I thought about them, and a sort of high level, like critical consensus around them. So instead of grounding this project in a sort of generic like AI summary of music history, I've grounded it in a real personal canon, one that I've been building for my entire life and tracking for, the past 7 years. And Claude is reasoning over and through my own listening, not the internet's and not its training data's. So here's the problem that I was trying to solve. I believe context is the most important thing in music. Knowing what a record inherited, what it rejected, what it made possible. That's the difference between hearing sound and hearing meaning. But the existing resources don't do that work that well. On the left is the Wikipedia page for Brill Building. The Brill Building is it's a building in New York, it's up in Midtown, but it was also the home of a songwriting tradition that shaped American pop for about a decade. And it also produced some of the most enduring songs of the 20th century. And it was also one of the biggest songwriting influences on the Beatles. This is the entire page. It's only 3 paragraphs long. And here's what it says about it in case you can't read. It says, demonstrated a continued influence on British and American pop and rock music in subsequent years. Like, that sentence communicates essentially nothing. It doesn't really tell you anything important or valuable, right? It doesn't tell you, for example, that John Lennon said that his and Paul McCartney's early ambition was to become the Goffin and King of England. Jerry Goffin and Carole King are two brill-building songwriters. It doesn't tell you that the early Beatles originals are brill-building pop and everything but the credit. They're hook-driven, they're structurally tight, they have identical melodic logic at times, they're designed for the charts, and that the only difference between those songs was the people that were writing the songs were also the people singing them in the Beatles' case. So Wikipedia has essentially turned one of the most consequential moments in pop music history into a little stub of an article. But it actually gets worse. So this is the same page's list of artists, which is actually the end of the page. There's nothing more besides like the references thing. And everybody here, like Jeff Barry, Goffin, King, Burt Bacharach, all these people, they're all songwriters. And it says 1960s artists / songwriters. But everybody missing here, like people like the Shirelles, the Ronettes, the Crystals, Dionne Warwick, all these people, these are all Black artists who actually sang these songs, and they're not even listed at all. So the only people listed are the songwriters, and the people that they were writing the songs from are completely gone. And that's like beyond a simple sort of gap in coverage. Like it reflects this like 50, 60-year pattern in how popular music gets talked about. It's a pattern where the contributions of women and Black artists are systematically underweighted, while a small number of white male artists get treated as the whole story. And then on the right side, we have a screenshot of Rate Your Music, which is the database that I mentioned. So this site sort of has the opposite problem. The data is extraordinary. There's information about every album or song or artist you could ever think of. Genre taxonomies, ratings, metadata, it's all user-generated and maintained, but it's a database, and databases can't always tell you a story, right? So like, it can tell you that Will You Love Me Tomorrow by the Shirelles, which is one of the groups that was excluded from the Wikipedia page, is rated a 3.97 out of 5. It's the number 3 highest rated song on the 1960 chart. But unless someone happens to mention it in their review, you'd never know that it was the first song by a Black girl group to reach #1, or that it taught a generation of songwriters, including Lennon and McCartney, what a pop song could be. So that kind of context is frequently absent from these pages. So I wanted the map to be, among many other things, like a careful, sourced, networked reframing of who actually did what and where the credit belongs to. So the architecture of this project makes that possible. When every genre note, and you'll see this soon, traces its influences, and every artist's note names the people they were inspired by, the network itself makes an argument about how influence actually flows. And that argument looks very different from the one that most rock histories have been telling. And so, yeah, I wanted something in between Wikipedia and Rate Your Music, more intentional than an encyclopedia, more narrative than a database, and built to tell the story accurately. And so that's what the map is. But before I show it to you, one last thing. Why this matters to me, because it frames everything that comes after this. So music, the one art form that connects every culture on Earth across every era of history and every continent. Everybody's been making music forever. And it's the art form that I love the most, that I take the most seriously. I think of it often as like an anthropological pursuit, just as much as an aesthetic one. When I listen to a record, I'm hearing the culture that produced it, the racial politics, the economics, the technology, the arguments about authenticity and commerce that the artists were navigating when they were making the music. My friend Otis recently told me that the way I think about music is really about connecting to the history of humanity. And that's exactly right. Like, the sounds are the entry point, but what's behind them is a picture of the human condition at a specific moment in time. Building the map is my attempt to make those connections visible, to trace the lines between the sounds and the people and the ideas and the conditions that shape them. And that's the real point that I see of like using AI in this way for this project, like to bring me closer to my own humanity through the most fundamentally human pursuit that I know, which is engaging seriously with art. And that's the inversion that I sort of want you to hold in your head for the rest of the talk. Context is the lens. And here's an example, like the Beatles, again, they covered the Shirelles on their first album. Twice, actually, on 2 songs. And if you don't know the context behind it, those are just covers, right? But like knowing that Lennon and McCartney studied these records, that they modeled their early songwriting on the Brill Building writers who wrote those songs, and that when Lennon actually met Carole King at a hotel in New York in 1965, he was so intimidated by her that he could barely speak. So that changes what those covers sound like. Like they stop being these random throwaway songs on the first Beatles album, and they start actually sounding like students paying tribute to the writers that they most wanted to be. The music is still the same, but because the context is different, now like it means something completely different. And that's sort of what I want the map to build. So that's the lens. This is a screenshot of the map as it currently looks. It's an Obsidian vault. Obsidian is the software that I use to build this. Every note is a point, and every link between notes is a connection. So if my note on the Brill Building mentions Phil Spector, that's a link. If my note on Phil Spector mentions the Wall of Sound, that's another link. So what you're looking at is about like 130 notes at the moment. They're all interconnected like that. The bigger the node, the bigger the dot, the more connections it has. So you can see which notes are the most central to the network just by looking at the graph. As you can see, Brill Building is really big, which you wouldn't get from Wikipedia or from Rate Your Music. And the colors represent different note types, like red is albums, green is genres, orange is artists, etc. Right now, the map is focused on the mid-50s through the mid-60s, so roughly the beginning of rock and roll through the British invasion. That's the period I've been building out the most intensively. The architecture is designed to expand, and it will soon, but I wanted to go deep before I went wide. And so that's what it is. It's like this historical web of cause and effect, action and reaction, inheritance and reinvention. And a little bit more about the different note types, so you just have a better sense here. Each has a different job. There are 8 broad types. Releases are the music itself, albums, singles, historically significant individual like album tracks. Every note on any of these songs has links to the Rate Your Music pages. It has links to the Apple Music and Spotify pages, so you can get right to the streaming sources about any music release that's in the map. Taxonomy is how they're classified, so genres, scenes, eras, and artists, industry, and techniques are the people, institutions, and methods that made this music. Moments are discrete historical events. And then the last 2, ideas and sources, are where the map becomes a little bit more than just like this reference. So the ideas notes are where I make arguments about influence, about race, gender, commerce, whatever it is, by engaging with specific scholars and critics. And sources notes map those scholars' arguments. So a reader can follow the chain from the streaming link in your headphones or your speakers or whatever, all the way to academic scholarship that explains what they're hearing. And you can get from between any of these note types, and they all connect together very fluidly. So I'm going to walk you guys through a single path to show how this works, and to also to show you what I mean about the map telling a different story than the traditional one. So this, I mean, is just like a screenshot of a note on the song Will You Love Me Tomorrow, which I had the Rate Your Music page for open earlier. At the top of the note, right under the title, are direct links to the song on Apple Music and Spotify. So you could click it, you could get right to the song, you could play it right now. The note tells you it was the first song by a Black girl group to reach #1 on the Hot 100, like I mentioned before. It tells you who wrote it, Jerry Goffin and Carole King. And it also tells you the song carries the doo-wop changes into sophisticated pop songwriting, and that Luther Dixon produced it with a restraint that let the vocals carry everything. And it wiki links outward to the Shirelles, the artist, to Goff and King's songwriting partnership, to the Brill building, to the girl group note, to all of these like ideas notes that I mentioned, etc. So if we were to follow one of the links to a genre note, let's do the Brill building. You've already seen the Wikipedia version of this. The Maps version names specific writers, specific contracts, specific dollar amounts. It has a section on the racial dynamics of who wrote the songs and who collected the royalties. White publishers collecting publishing income, while Black performers, many of them young women, received whatever their managers could negotiate. And it wiki links to like dozens of other notes. And this is not even the full note. It's like twice as long as this probably. So follow another link to Lennon-McCartney. You already know the foundation that I just talked about. They learned to write by studying Brill building songs. But what this note also traces is the consequence. So once they proved that the people singing the songs could also write them, self-authorship became the expectation. Within a few years, the Brill building tradition, the model, professional songwriters writing hits for other people to sing looked obsolete. And that shift changed not only how pop music was made, but also like how it was judged. And so that's where the next note picks up, which is all about authenticity. So this is where I'm sort of starting to make an argument. Basically, like the self-authorship expectation that Lennon-McCartney established became an ideology. It was an ideology that sorted musicians into authentic and manufactured, with the sorting following predictable lines. Like white male rock musicians who wrote their own songs received the presumption of authenticity automatically. Black pop performers, female singers, professional songwriters, the people who built the tradition that the Beatles were actually studying, were denied it. So if Dionne Warwick singing Burt Bacharach and Hal David songs was considered like manufactured pop, Bob Dylan singing his own songs is considered authentic. And the note also engages with specific scholars by name, which you can see in like the purple links there. And each of these scholars has a wiki-linked sources note. So if we follow one of these links to this book by Jacqueline Warwick on girl groups, she's arguing that the girl groups dismissed as these products of the system were actual sites of genuine cultural production. The vocal harmonies, the performance conventions, the way they navigated like a white-dominated industry as young Black women, that was real artistic labor, and the critical establishment refused to see it because the authenticity framework had already decided that professionally written pop by young women didn't count. So what we have here is like 5 notes, 5 different types, a genre, an artist, a scholarly source. And you've traveled from a streaming link, the actual record in your ears, to a published academic argument about what that record means, and in this case, why it was dismissed. And along the way, you've gotten the story that you would never get from Wikipedia or from Rate Your Music. And so as far as I know, this is the only place where you can end up, like start with a streaming link and end up in a handful of clicks at like a published and reviewed academic argument about what it means. And so I want to move on to the core claim of like the talk here is not about like technical skill. Like a lot of us think about working with AI in terms of prompt engineering, like the right system prompt, the right chain of thought, the right model. And of course, like all that stuff matters, but building the map also taught me that the skill that actually determines the quality of what you get from AI in this case is more like editorial judgment. Knowing what good looks like, refusing to accept a lower standard, that's closer to being an editor-in-chief than an engineer. I don't know anything about coding. I can't code at all. I don't know anything. Like, I just, but doing all of this stuff, like, reminded me a bit of running Firebird. Reading through writers' drafts, like setting the guidelines for people to stick to, flagging issues, determining like a standard of quality, like, all of that stuff transfers over, and only my own discernment built over years of loving music and talking about it, arguing about it, could produce a system like this. So that's human taste. Like you can't get that from a prompt. That's just something that we all have because we're alive. So for example, this is part of this like close reading checklist that I developed. So every note that gets created by Claude gets run through this and a lot more actually before it ships. So every single one of these items are things that you catch by reading through a draft carefully. And also all of it, I mean, these are just like basic like AI-isms that we've all seen because we've all used like ChatGPT or whatever, like this like, oh, like the Brill building is not just a building, it's a revolution, or like, this is not simply a song, it's a statement. All of that stuff, like all of these things like are caught by this checklist. And I read through every note. Sometimes I fix things myself, but usually I have Claude read through its own output and fix it before I see any of it. So this is a systematic process, and like, you know, I've built this through reading tons of these notes and through my standards at, you know, through Firebird. And here's what the difference looks like in practice. Like, this is sort of just like a naive, like really, really bad note, which like you might get when you tell Chat or Claude to just like, oh, like write me a note about the Brill building. And like, this is just like, I don't know, it has so many like unearned metaphors, like the beating heart of American pop music, like so much filler, throat clearing, these like superlatives that don't belong there, and also like a factual error. It says like Be My Baby, the single topped the charts in 1963, but it didn't. So, I mean, it's sort of, I mean, it's competent, like it makes sense, all of the stuff, but it's just like, it's just not really that like compellingly readable to me. And so like, here's a little bit about like the constraints that I've developed. This is part of a much longer document that's like 10,000 words, so that it knows how to structure things, how to format things, etc. And here's the actual note in the map again. Same subject, same model, fundamentally different output. And the model.
Can I ask the 10,000 word input prompt?
Yeah.
How did you get to that? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I'll answer that later, but thank you. That's a good question. So no worries. The model didn't get, you know, smarter between these two versions. Like, I'm still using the same model, but like because of this checklist, because of these standards, like that I've refined over like many hours, many days, weeks, whatever, like the output has become something completely different than you would get by just putting in a little one-line prompt into it. And it's also like, these are things that I've developed because like I know what I want the notes to look like, and I know what looks good and what doesn't look good to me. I've just gotten more and more rigorous about everything over time. And yeah, so they didn't exist on day one. Like I said, like it evolved from these mistakes about, oh, like Be My Baby charting at number 2 instead of number 1. And that's sort of like the process. Like, all of these principles come from mistakes that I caught. And every note gets updated as new notes get created. So like, if I created a note, and I'll show you in the next slide, on Chuck Berry, which I just created this note yesterday, and look, it already has like 23 connections. And the way that all of these connections get maintained is because when Claude writes a note, it also can read through the rest of the database at once and look for connections that should exist, like places where his name was mentioned, places where he should be mentioned. And so it can then update his own note with those links, but also the other 23 notes with the links as well. This is something that I can never do like by myself. And this is what keeps the map alive and breathing and everything, is like, no note will ever like stay the same. And like each time something, I decide to like add something, it will impact like dozens of other notes. Yeah, I mean, one thing I also, you know, want to be clear about before we leave this section is that like, I'm not trying to replace human writing by doing this. Like, or even approach it, right? Like the best music criticism is always going to be written by humans. It's a deeply human art, and I don't believe AI can get there. So the prose in these notes is good, but it has a narrower job, right? It's more like to be accurate, it's to be readable, it's to be clear enough to do the structural work of connecting these notes to every other note. And the prose is essentially the scaffolding that lets the network hold itself together. And so creating this like kind of living, breathing system has been really, really exciting. It's changed the way I think about music. And I can only imagine the ways it will continue to teach me things and change how I think going forward. And Claude is really essential in this process for the reasons I described, not to think for me, right? But like to hold this network that's continuously growing in its head while I make these editorial decisions. And I want to start wrapping things up by just saying that like everyone has a domain, right? Like music is my domain. I care about it enough to spend like thousands of hours building systems to understand it better. First the spreadsheets, then all my playlists, then this. And so I just want to return to what I said earlier about how this project brings me closer to my own humanity. Like that's the thing I want you to take away. Like we spent a lot of time in rooms like this one talking about AI in terms of capability and efficiency, but the deepest thing that this project has given me is like a richer, more honest relationship with the art that I love and the human stories embedded in everything. And so like if your domain isn't music, but maybe it's wine or architecture or film or your family history or whatever, like the tools exist right now to build serious structured knowledge about it, knowledge that's networked, that evolves, that synthesizes the best thinking on the subject. And the constraint is whether you're willing to develop the editorial judgment to actually use the tools well. And you can also learn while you build these things. Like I don't know that much about music theory, for example, but because I have these notes on music theory, I've been learning a bit more about theory and like been able to teach myself way more than I would have been otherwise. So that's sort of the overview of the map. But one last thing, I need to plug this larger project that I've been building called Continuing Education. So, because the map is part of it. So far, Continuing Education has been a series of collective vinyl listening parties that I host at my apartment. The beautiful hi-fi sound system. People bring records or they pick from my collection and we throw them on, we talk about them throughout the night. But for one album each night that I pick, we do something a bit different. We blow out all the candles, we sit in the dark, I say a few words about the history of the album, why it's important, why I chose it, and then I drop the needle. Nobody talks, nobody looks at their phones, and we just listen. So it's like 20 to 30 people all tuned into one thing, and our focus is trained solely on the sound in front of us. It's a kind of experience that like barely exists anymore. Giving a record your full undivided attention in a room full of other people doing the same thing. And so the map is another layer of this project. The broader mission ties it all together. We want to help people find new ways of connecting with music that are grounded in real context, focused attention, and shared experience. Ways of discovering music that don't depend on algorithms built around profit rather than art. The map builds the context, the listening events build the experience, and they feed each other. And there will be other layers in the future too. But I'm also excited to announce that this summer, due to the amount of interest we've gotten in these events, which is so awesome, we're planning on expanding Continuing Education with a new series of public listening events hosted at sound-focused spaces around the city, some of which are already in existence, some of which we're actually building speakers for and helping with the design of the spaces. There's going to be one on Mulberry Street that I'm really excited about. So if you're interested in learning more, You can head over to bringrecords.com, which is the website for continuing education. You can put your contact info in. We'll be in touch. And if you want to get in touch with me or see more of what I've been working on, you can go to my website, which is shafrasier.com. And one more thing before I wrap it up or turn it over to questions or whatever. If anybody knows anybody in music journalism or history or musicology or any musicians who might find the map interesting or continuing education interesting or whatever else, I'd love to connect with them, like whether it's feedback, ideas, criticism, or just like a conversation about what this project could become, because it's still in its very early stages. I started the map a month ago. Any exchange at all would mean a lot to me at the moment. So I know I went a little bit over time. Sorry, guys, but I'm going to open things up for questions. I'm also happy to demo the map like later on during the open time if anybody wants to see it. Yeah, thank you guys for listening. I know you had a question earlier, right?
Yes. Kind of changed. Have you noticed? Because the graph currently has like 250 nodes or 150?
130 about, yeah.
Have you noticed performance decrease when trying to make a lot bigger, the graph a lot bigger?
No, I haven't noticed any issues with performance, like a million?
Yeah.
No, I mean, this is the,
Update the neighbors and
Mhm.
continuously have to like.
well, like the nice thing about the system is that since it's just like .markdown files, the file sizes are very, very small. It's just text files. So like all Claude is doing is just searching through like different text like markdown files, and because like Claude's own skill systems and everything are sort of like engineered to read markdown, like that's its sort of default anyway, it does it really smoothly. And so I've seen much bigger knowledge graphs with like, I mean, at many, many levels more notes than what I have here that run pretty seamlessly. But I don't know. I don't really know until I get there. I mean, eventually, I want the map to be like, I want it to cover everything from whatever time to like today. Like I want there to be pages on producers that don't have Wikipedia pages about every single little subgenre of like trap music or punk or whatever, like it will be completely comprehensive. So we'll see. I don't know. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, so every claim, like let's say like the claim about the Shirelles song getting to #1, it was the first Black girl group song to get to #1. Claude writes that, and then every single like statement it makes, every factual claim it makes, it takes the claim and uses the internet to look it up and verify it, and then provides me a summary of each thing that it's looked up, each M dash it's caught, each rule of 3 it's caught, each not X but Y, every single verification, every single check is done at like another, like a level that happens like after the note is actually composed. Then it recomposes the note, and then I read through and do a sanity check on it. Anybody else?
Are we getting that new focus model at some point?
Mhm.
What would you be most excited to see it be better in regards to the project?
That's a really good question, because I think like I'm already so happy with the performance of it. Like I don't even know. I mean, like I think it could be a bit better at just like catching certain, like sometimes like there are still, I've noticed consistent issues where like let's say like I write a note on a new genre like rhythm and blues or something, and then like this genre was already mentioned in like 5 or 10 albums before, or singles or whatever. Sometimes like it has trouble like determining where to update the links in the old notes. Sometimes it forgets, it misses things, sometimes it doesn't. Like, so like I've been trying to make the guidelines the past few days a bit more like stringent that way because I have been catching a few errors sometimes where it just misses things like that. And so like I think like with more advanced like reasoning capabilities, I would hope that it would be able to catch more of these sorts of errors without me having to tell it, and then update my little guidelines and everything. But yeah.
And so you made the knowledge graph, and then you can interact with the knowledge graph through your prompting. And if I understand correctly, with the 10,000 input injection.
So the 10,000 albums that I've heard are my spreadsheet. So that's like that's just like the context that Claude has as to like what I know and what I've listened to. I can ask it questions about the notes that have been written before. It has like memory files within the system so that it doesn't have to hold everything in its own model context. And then like it can also, of course, interact with its own intrinsic knowledge and the internet.
Yeah. So if you want to interact with the knowledge graph, do you like take the entire knowledge graph, put it into the prompt, and then ask questions? Or do you have like a RAG system that interacts with it, or?
It's connected directly to my Obsidian. So like I use Cowork, so it has access to the entire file system, and it knows all the files that are within the, yeah.
Sorry.
I guess in terms of like, evaluation and making sure that what you're doing is correct. Like when you're showing the default, what
Yeah.
whichever model you used generated, and then the one that was the ideal one, basically what you graphed it with, the map and everything. I'm assuming that it's very different depending on what you ask or what type of genre, et cetera, you're looking for. So are you making checking, or how do you check to make sure that it's the right outcome of the desired?
Well, it's done through the close reading checklist that I described earlier with that Claude like reads through it the first time. But the reason why I started in the 60s with all this stuff and with the Beatles and with the Brill Building is like, I mean, obviously I listen to a lot of music. I read a lot about music. I founded a music magazine. So I know a lot about the Beatles. Like my earliest memory in life is the first time I heard the Beatles. So by starting with generating these notes on the Beatles and the Brill Building, every single claim that's being made, I know if it's right or wrong immediately because I know everything about it. So like, I don't need to verify anything. I mean, sometimes I might have to look like a little thing up, but every single claim that's made in any note about the Beatles, I'll know immediately if it's wrong or if it's right. And so I started that way because like I needed to make sure that I could sort of trust the output. So that in the future, when I get into genres that I don't know as much about, I can sort of have a little bit more faith in the process of close reading it through Claude and then me re-verifying everything if I need to. Yeah.
Last question. First of all, Shay.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Is the graph living / going to live on a server?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Like local to your.
Yeah. Currently, it's local to my my files and everything, but eventually, I do want to publish it on like a website. Like I want this to be a public resource. I don't know if it's going to live on the continuing education website or my own or some secret third option, but eventually it will be public, and I want it to be this continuously evolving resource that anybody could come to. But I haven't even thought about how to actually structure like a website to do that. So yeah. And that was the last question, right? So thank you all for listening. Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Shay. That was amazing. Yeah, so our next speaker is Andrew. He has some super interesting stuff to share about how agents should have a bedtime. If you
Thank you, Andrew.
All right, cool. I'll go ahead and get started. So thanks everybody for coming. My name is Andrew Orobator. I am a senior Android engineer at Reddit. And today I'm going to be talking to you about why your AI agent needs a bedtime. So let's talk a little bit about the problem and kind of relate it back to humans, just because something that I've noticed is that agents are doing a lot of biomimicry. They're just mimicking what Mother Nature is already doing. So let's say that you've pulled an all-nighter or two, you've gone 48 to 72 hours without sleep. So what kinds of things start happening? So you lose the ability to form new memories. You start losing the ability to tell what's important, sure that the learning actually sticks across conversations and across sessions. So this is a quote by Mark Barra. He is another software engineer in the space. And he's saying, we're building Formula One engines without thinking about oil changes. We're always thinking about, how do I make my agent do this? Or how do I give it this extra capability? Or how do I add on top of it? Without thinking about, how does this agent age over time? How is this agent going to be performing over time? How is it going to be consistent over time? So that brings me to a little bit of a bio lesson. So every single biological being that learns also sleeps. Evolution converged on it just because the plasticity stability trade-off is fundamental. So what is that plasticity stability trade-off? Essentially, you want to have stability. So if you learn that tigers are dangerous, you don't want to forget that the next day because that might kill you. But then plasticity, you also want to be flexible and bring in new learnings. Oh, that's a baby tiger. Maybe that's not so dangerous, but it's connected to its mom, so I need to still be careful. So you still want to maintain both of those without you just essentially don't want to forget the old stuff. You want to forget the new stuff and have those be together. So sleep isn't rest. It's not passive. You're not just like shutting off. There's a lot of active processes that are going on while you're sleeping. Sleep is active offline optimization, and biology figured this out eons ago. So let's talk a little bit about the biology. So again, with the plasticity stability trade-off, a system that learns too easily forgets what it knew and it won't be able to hold on to things. And a system that holds on too tightly cannot adapt. So you want to find this Goldilocks zone where you're right in the middle, you're holding on to useful information while you're still able to absorb new concepts. Okay, so let's talk about the two phases of sleep. So the first stage of sleep is called NREM. And what it does in the brain is it stabilizes memories, it prunes weak synapses, and transfers memory from the short-term part of your brain to the long-term part of your brain. So if we were to convert this over to agentic systems, this would be similar to consolidation. So let's deduplicate our skills, deduplicate our documentation, compress if they are overly verbose, or start to break things down using progressive disclosure, start to promote patterns, and garbage collect, remove any things that are stale. So that is the first stage of sleep. And then the next kind of sleep that we have is called REM sleep. And REM sleep is analogous to dreaming. So this is where you are replaying and transforming memories. It's where you're integrating those memories into long-term storage and detecting contradiction. So on the agentic side, this would be conflict detection, merge overlapping skills, extracting principles, just essentially any meta learning that you can do on top of the data that you already have. Okay, so now I want to talk a bit about episodic to semantic transfer. That's essentially how you go from short-term memory, like episodic or episodes, to semantic transfer or meanings, essentially. What does this mean at a higher level? What's the high level pattern? What's actually going on that's common between all of these different episodes? So here's a little example of a conversation with my agent. I have it hooked up to Telegram, and sometimes I ask it to do stuff for me. So in this particular case, I asked it to fetch an article on Twitter. And you can see here that it says use the bird CLI to fetch Twitter content after web fetch failed. User seemed pleased. So that's the raw session log. And then after you do the first stage of sleep or the NREM consolidation, we'll take that main learning and we'll look at it at a little bit of a higher level. So now we're going to say when the user sends Twitter links, use bird CLI immediately, web scraping is blocked. So you see that we've gone from this one episodic, this very specific detailed instance to a bit more of like a generalized high level flow that's going to be more broadly applicable. And then we can take this even further with REM abstraction and just generalize it so it's even more useful. So when a specialized CLI tool exists for a domain, Bird for Twitter, GH for GitHub, use it directly rather than generic approaches. And this way we are regularly extracting meta patterns and learning in a durable way where we can extract concepts and reuse them. Okay, so synaptic homeostasis. So forgetting is a very intentional and important thing. If you were to never forget, you're always just bringing in new data and you don't know what's relevant. It becomes very hard to scale, make connections and everything like that. So you actually want to come up with a strategy for forgetting, pruning, getting rid of old information as new updates come in. So on that note, there are different types of knowledge and you want to have them decay at different types of rates. So a core operation would have a low decay rate, and you can kind of think about it like riding a bicycle. It's something that is very deep in your memory and you're not likely to forget it just because it's so core. Another type of memory or another type of knowledge could be an active skill. So this decays a little bit faster than the riding a bike, but it's facts that you use daily. And maybe when you stop using those kinds of facts, let's say that you move on to a different project, then you downgrade those skills or you decay that knowledge. Next is context specific. So this is a bit more recent. This has to do with the kind of task that you're doing right now. And maybe it's going to be relevant for the current session, but after that, maybe some is going to be relevant, maybe some is not going to be relevant. And then after that, we have ephemeral types of knowledge. So you can think of it as like a stranger's face, things that you just need to grab information once and then toss away immediately. And then that has a much higher decay rate than, say, riding a bike. So really simple formula for decaying, just to kind of get the point across. You have your old priority, you multiply it by the decay rate, and then you get your new priority, and it's just going to keep on decreasing over time. Okay, so now I want to talk a bit about the current operating rhythm and like what's actually been implemented and what loops on a regular basis. So at 2 a.m., I have a LLM running on a cron job that does the sleep cycle. And it does all of the consolidation, the abstraction, and goes through both NREM and REM sleep. At 6:30 a.m., I get a morning brief telling me what exactly happened with sleep, or what connections were made, what was pruned, what things it discovered. During the daytime, it's just active usage. Chatting, writing to my Obsidian vaults, evidence capture, things like that. It's definitely possible to have systems in place for active memory and active learning, but I have only focused on sleep and the offline maintenance cycle initially. Okay, so nighttime maintenance as it's run today. The very first thing that we do is extraction replay. So we go through all of the chats and we take a look at all of the different facts that are inside. We take a look at any corrections that might have happened. And then we do what's called a family and canonical pass. So this is essentially grouping things together. So if a bunch of topics or memories are related, we want to give them the same family ID just so that we can link them together. So let's say that I'm planning a trip and I have my flights, I have my hotel, and I have like the tickets to a concert or something like that. Each one of those memories would have the same family ID because they're all related. Next is the canonical ID, and this is essentially the root note or like the executive summary. This says, hey, if you're looking to learn more about the trip to Coachella, take a look at this particular note, and it has all of those details as well as links out to more detailed notes. Provenance. Another thing that it does is preserve provenance. I learned about this word when I was like researching machine learning memory and stuff like that. Didn't really know what it means. It's essentially receipts for memory. So where did this memory come from? If it has been consolidated, what pieces constituted this particular memory? And just just gives you an audit trail, essentially. Next, we have consolidation. So after we have extracted everything, we've grouped things into the family ID, we have the canonical note, then we're going to start collapsing everything just to get rid of any duplicates. So we're collapsing paraphrases. So let's say I ask for, there's a note for hotel, there's a note for place to stay, and then there is a note for the Hilton. Right? Those should all get collapsed down just because they're paraphrased and they really are pointing to the same kind of idea. After that, I do a refresh on some operator artifacts. So I am using QMD on top of my database in order to implement search. Things like emitting the morning report and things just like doing health checks. So a little bit more about like each particular topic. So the canonical note I talked about a little bit before, but you have one stable answer, the executive summary. And for an example, you can say, if there's a question, what time zone should I use for scheduling? Then the canonical answer is going to be use America/New York as the default. And it matters because instead of all of these duplicate, oh, the time zone is this, the time zone is that, hey, stop using UTC, it has one thing to check for. And then if you want actual deeper information, then you can always go deeper. So family identity, this is how things are grouped together. So I mentioned that trip to Coachella, for example, each one would have its own family ID, and that's how you know that they are grouped or related together. Okay, so evidence traces. So this is what this is like the layer below the canonical note. So if you ever want to take a deeper dive into, okay, I understand that I'm going to Coachella, but like, what was the name of my hotel and what's my check-in time? The canonical note is not going to have that. That's way too low level. So you'll go to the canonical note. You'll see that it has all these different edges for all the different details. Then you'll go down into that specific note in order to get your details. Okay, let's skip through this. Okay, so one thing, all of these memories and these graphs are highly connected, and they have different types of connections. So one type is the same family. So a bunch of notes may share the same family. They might be directly related. Another type of connection is derived from or supersedes. I don't know about you guys, but I correct my agent a lot. And I want to have a trail of notes where it always knows the most recent and best way of actually doing something. Another type of connection is contradicts or contradictions. We don't want to delete the things that have been contradicted. We want to hold on to them just so we can reference them for later if that actually pops up. And by storing our trends or contradictions, we have a better understanding of the concept. And then next, references or projects. This allows you to hop from family to family. So let's say you went to Coachella one year, but then you went to Rolling Loud the year before, and then Afrobeats before that. Then you would want to have all of these different families be connected so that there is a way of traversing through the graph and figuring out that all of these different families are connected. Okay, so QMD first recall. QMD, for those who don't know, is essentially a search tool built specifically for agents. So what's really nice about it is that it allows for a semantic search. So if you search your database for umbrella, it won't just give you an exact text search for umbrella. It'll do a semantic search and it'll search for umbrella. It'll search for rain. It'll search for raincoat, and it'll expand that search just so you're more likely to hit what you're looking for, even if it's not an exact match. So I use that to search over memory. There is both a light search and a deep search. So the light search just goes over the canonical node, the executive summary. And then if I want a deep search, then I can go from the canonical node down to the episodic evidences and get specific details how I want. And then, yeah, escalation policy. Most things will only need the canonical note. If you really need more detail, then you can tell the agent, or if it's missing from the canonical summary, then it can always go and get more detail. Okay. Harnesses, not hope. So I want to talk about how I built this, because even though I haven't looked at any of the code, I have been very structured with how I'm building this and very, very methodical. So I had all of these notes. I had all this data. The very first thing that I wanted to do was create a golden state of what all the memory should look like once it's all properly consolidated, once all the links are properly done, because I need to know what good looks like and I need to know when I'm done. So I pretty much went, I talked to Claude and I was like, hey, look at all of this raw data, pretend like you're the agent and do all the consolidation. What would a perfect pass of this look like, essentially? So now I have this golden state that I'm trying to progress through. And with each iteration, I can say, hey, did I move closer? Did I actually solve an edge case? Am I getting closer to this golden state, or am I regressing? And that way I know whether or not I'm moving forward, and it's not just vibes or like, hey, remember, make no mistakes. So the next thing that I have, so the memory meta golden run, that's for storage. And I also wanted to make a golden state for retrieval and just essentially like answering questions, right? So if you can probably guess, but it's just a quiz. Here are the different things that I'm asking you. I expect these particular answers. Some of them will require just looking at the canonical note. Some require actually looking at the episodic note based on how much detail is being asked. Okay, so after that, essentially just ran more tests, took QMD meta extraction, and essentially went from day 0 to day 10 and just made sure that all the tests were passing. And then an experiment loop. This saved me a lot of time. Okay, so traversing through all of my data, even with just like 11 days worth of chat history, it took maybe about an hour to do the entire processing, semantic reasoning, consolidation, and all that stuff. And I didn't want to like wait an hour, make a change, wait an hour, see if it worked. That would take way too long. So instead, what I did was I developed a tiny harness. So the harness is a very small subset of the larger training data, but it has examples in it that are representative of a lot of different things. And if I'm trying to test a particular edge case, I can just add that test case to the harness and then test it and like verify that it works on the small scale before scaling it up to all of my data. Okay, so this is the beauty of a self-maintaining system. The system ran overnight, so last night, and it went through and had some stats about what the report did. However, it found an error and it alerted me of this error. And I was able to just paste that error into ChatGPT, and it was able to fix it just because it's letting me know when things are wrong and being proactive about memory management. So a couple of things about what's allowed to change versus not allowed to change based on biology. So there are typically two types of genes that are expressed. So there is your genome and then there's your epigenome. So the genome is stuff that never changes. Like you're not going to wake up with purple skin tomorrow. That's not how genes work. So it's not where you sleep. Yeah, it doesn't change eye color, blood type, basic body plan. Next, your epigenome is your markers on top of DNA. So these are the things that change with your environment. So muscle growth, immune adaptation, stress response. And then last, we have the transient things. These are moment-to-moment activities, and they're disposable and constantly rebuilt. So over on the agent side, we have something pretty similar. So your genome, you can kind of think of it as your SoulMD or your agents.md. This is something that you don't really want to change just because it is core to the behavior of your agent. So update it sparingly and update it with caution. Then you have your epigenetic files. These are things that you can change directly or via PR. So runbooks, skills, memory files, configurations. And then after that, you have your transient or working memory. And these are things like your current context window or your current conversation state. Maybe you don't want to save all of it, but there are components of it that might be useful for later. Okay, so earning trust. You initially don't want to have your agents just opening up PRs and merging them into main right away. You want to work up to that over time, essentially. So here I have a couple of different types of tasks, and you essentially want to, essentially you just want to work on them over time. So the morning brief, here's a little bit of a example of what gets sent to me. So I'll see all the different types of things that were extracted. I'll also see all the different consolidation that happened overnight, as well as the morning fix queue. What are the different things that need to be fixed or updated? The cool thing about this sleep stuff is that there is industry convergence. I initially wrote about the agent sleep concepts end of February. I believe it was around middle of March when OpenClaw launched their dreaming feature, and Claude Code has implemented its dreaming feature as well. So yeah, Claude Code, you have session-to-session memory maintenance. It's going to be regularly writing down files for you in Markdown so it can remember later. You have OpenClaw, which has a dream phase and promotion, also file-based memory. And ours, it is a nightly graph-baked maintenance system. So there's a little bit of a pattern between all of these different implementations. The very first one is that this is scheduled offline consolidation. Your agent is taking time where it's not doing anything that's productive. It's not adding more. It's cleaning up what it already has and making sure that it's all good for you for the next day. The next thing is phased-based processing. Just like there are different phases of sleep, we want to have different phases of this consolidation just because they serve different purposes. We also want to have threshold-based survival. So let's say that you make a small correction and then you say, never mind. You probably don't want that to be persisted forever. That would be kind of annoying. So if something is really important, if it's repeated several times, that's when you can start to elevate its importance and elevate the threshold for survival. You also want an audit trail. You want to know what changed and why. You don't want it to just be auto-updating without you having any understanding of what's going on. And then they're all using the biological metaphor. It seems to be pretty apt where you are sleeping, you're dreaming, you are replaying the day's events. And this all leads me to believe that this is discovered rather than invented. Lots of people are coming up with this idea around the similar time. So a little bit on where my implementation goes further than either OpenClaw or Claude Code. So everybody does memory consolidation off the bat, so that's a check. For hierarchical recall, so both Claude's memory and OpenClaw's memory are just flat markdown files, but that's not actually how human memory works. You have this hierarchical knowledge where you have, let's say like a concept of birds, right? And that'll be your executive summary. Birds can usually fly. They typically have beaks and they have feathers. And then maybe let's say you go like a level under that, and then there are penguins, there are pigeons, and there are doves. There's a hierarchy. There's an inherent hierarchy to memory. and we want to be able to exploit that. So harnesses, being able to test and verify your changes and making sure they're good over time. With Claude and OpenClaw, especially OpenClaw, it seems to be just vibes. You're promoting things, but there's no real transparency into the system, and it's not very easy to change or modify the system as it is. For live maintenance, it varies, but for ours, we have an overnight run. It does a morning post-mortem, so you can see what changed, what went wrong, and how to fix it. And for an operator visible graph, I don't know if there's a way to visualize your Claude memories or OpenClaw memories besides just textual representations. With ours, there is a backend that is live, and the dashboard is currently in progress. Cool. So where this stands, a little bit of stats. So for scheduling, light recall now returns one canonical note, so it knows I'm in Brooklyn, and it doesn't have to go through all of the different episodes and my corrections in order to understand that. The deep retrieval, it can still recover evidence, and it can understand, okay, this is the instance where it corrected me about UTC time, or this is the instance where it corrected me about that. And the memory graph is real. It has over 1,000 edges, so lots of different connections. So it's easy to traverse and find things. And the tiny golden hardness has been very useful. Lots of test coverage and scenarios. So what doesn't exist yet and where this still needs improvement? So I did a latest snapshot, and right now it's a little too flat, and we're not consolidating enough memory. So that's something that I still want to work on. The iteration that I've been doing so like the target memories, I want to get close to 100 and 160. Right now, my latest recent set has around 250 to 300 memories. So I'm getting closer, but still not there yet. And the dashboard visualization is incomplete. And harnesses are green, but I'm still finding more test cases to expand to it and iterate over time. I'm also not doing any active forgetting right now. Right now, I want to focus on consolidation and just making sure that memory works before I start deleting things. Okay, so talk a little bit about agents, or I guess just like open clause and things like that. But production code bases need sleep too. So if you are a software developer working on a code base, this is still going to be very relevant for you. So when you have a bunch of skills, they might go out of date. You want to scan for contradictions, dead references, proper backlinks, and everything like that. You want to make sure that everything is referencing each other properly, and that the scaffolding is holding, essentially. And it would be helpful to also ship a maintenance loop. So if you have a skill, run that after every PR, just so that all of your skills are staying healthy. Okay, so getting started. So for the agent sleep hygiene, pick a canonical store, pick some place where you're actually storing and maintaining this memory. It could be an Obsidian vault, it could be a database, could be markdown files. Next, you want to add some hierarchy, so add light and deep retrieval. And you also want to write negative golden tests. So you want to write tests for things where so you don't want to test what should appear, you want to test what doesn't appear. And you want to make sure that you have tests for both cases. Okay, so for repositories, you want to start with an audit skill. You want to encode repo invariants. So make sure that you are dealing with the right APIs, that you are referencing the right files, and they are actually in the right places. And then you want to run this report regularly. So maybe after every developer makes a PR, and then you could even have a larger nightly run that goes over the entire code base. Okay, so memory systems drift, skill systems drift, code bases drift. If AI is touching your production workflow, you have a maintenance problem now. So the things you need are offline consolidation, audits, harnesses, morning fixes. Your agent needs a bedtime, give it one. Thank you. Are there any questions? What's up?
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. Kind of wrapping around the presentation. And wondering, is your sleep metaphor like a way to kind of talk about context rather than
Yes, exactly. So take a look at humans, right? If you're awake for 72 hours, you're gonna have a hard time remembering things. Someone gives you a long sequence of numbers. Maybe you remember the beginning, maybe you remember the end, but the middle, who knows about that, right? Or maybe like you're doing this long research task and you say you read a paper that says all pigeons are blue, and then you read another paper that says all pigeons are red, and now those contradicts, and like you have to figure out like what's what. So if you have this long run an agent, then you're building up this context. There might be contradictions, there might be context rot, and if you tell it to chill out for a second, take a look at all of its documentation, consolidate everything. That's how you get it to perform on a regular basis, by telling it to sleep. Yeah. What's up? Yeah, go ahead.
is one of the solutions to that they have just like a well-defined? So I saw you use Claude. It's had like a well-defined Claude and file.
No, because the Claude MD file can itself drift and get out of date over time, right? Because like, what if that's talking about an API where the API changed? Or what if that is saying, hey, look at this folder for all the cool stuff, and the cool stuff folder doesn't exist anymore because it moved to cooler stuff. You know, like everything about the code base can change and drift over time. And that was one of the questions that I initially had, right? How do you, like, if I'm writing code, I know how to write tests for that. That's pretty straightforward. But if I'm writing a markdown file that's in plain English, how do I test a markdown file, right? So you can use the agent to test it. Look through all these markdown files. Are there any contradictions? Fix them. Look through all these files. Are there any stale references? Fix them. And you can like go about that in that kind of pattern to just maintain things over time. What's up? This is super relevant to your stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to talk to you more about it later. But one question that I had written down, and like I said, I don't really, I can't code. I'm not a software engineer. But one of the things that I think about all the time with dreaming, as we as humans dream, is like it's not only just like memory consolidation, but also sometimes we get inspired through dreams. Sometimes we have new ideas. Figure out solutions to a problem, something like that. So I'm wondering, like, have you noticed, or do you think there is potential for like something similar to happen with this like sleep schedule that you've been like developing and talking about for your agent? Like, is there potential for like if your agent is working on a website or something, like does it come up with new ideas through this process? Like truly novel ideas, or do you think there's still like a level of like prompting and sort of guidance that you have to give it before you get to like?
Sure. At a high level, I think about creating new, like novel ideas and being inspired as essentially taking two concepts or things that may not seem to be connected or related and connecting them and putting them together. And specifically with this memory solution that I'm making, maybe bicycles are not connected to fish, but maybe if I was riding my bike on the pier, then boom, you have this connection where it can suddenly start to connect those different things. So in that particular way, I do see it making interesting and novel connections over time, and maybe the search will bring up different things. So, but with regards to like making novel ideas, I think there are inherent limitations in the model, and maybe it can't come up with like a flashy new website design, but it can say, oh, hey, did you know that Kanye West sampled Ray Charles? And like it'll be able to like connect those two and like make new insights that might not have appeared in like the music history database.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. What's up?
You pre-inject memories when someone sends a message, or you give it a tool if you have to access fetch memories like on the fly.
There's a couple different so there's levels to it. So I'm the only one talking to my bot on Telegram. It's just me and my bot. And then every single chat message that either the user sends or the bot sends or even tool calls, they get logged, the full thing. So I have two search systems. One is search history, and that just searches the memory history. And that's pretty straightforward, but that's not really good for deep search. So the next thing that I have is a memory search, and that is what's going over all the memory systems that I talked about and showed you. And that has the ability to do both like the light search, where it only looks at the canonical note, and the deep search, where it looks at the episodic notes.
And do you limit the amount of memory because you could also fill in your context and slow it down? So
these memories are not getting injected into the context window all the time. What happens is that it does on-demand context filling. So I'll say, hey, what's on my calendar for tomorrow? It doesn't have my entire GCal in the context window. It'll go and do a tool call and then return the result to me. Hey, what did I write about in Obsidian 2 weeks ago about sandwiches? It doesn't have that in the context window. It'll go through and do the memory search and then return the answer. Yeah. Any other questions?
So you mentioned that you have to run this data around for an hour. So I assume that, I mean, like, all you need to do in this case is like all your conversation per day, all your PR, and get it from your source space. So why is this taking an hour to run?
So it takes an hour to run because this is not deterministic. And I want to separate this out from like coding with PRs and like a product for daily work and agents. This system that I talked about with like the layers of memory is primarily for agents like OpenClaw and things like that. For code bases, all you need is a skill. You just need an audit skills skill, and it'll look through everything. And it's doing it'll do like LLM reasoning. It'll go over everything. What takes so long to process all of my chats is that it's not deterministic either. So there's going to be a lot of LLM reasoning. Are these two things similar? I don't know. You can't do an exact like character difference because one might be car and the other one might be Honda Civic, right? Those two don't look the same, but conceptually they're similar, right? So yeah, I don't know if that helps.
I have a follow-up.
Yeah.
Maybe not very related, like because you mentioned like your solid node, which is one knowledge base, have to support like the family tags, to support like contradiction, and to support like supersedes. Also, like do you use like a bespoke like build your own node graph system, or you?
Yeah, I'm building my own graph system right now. There is essentially like it's stored in a database, but then you have the memory as one column, and then you have, let's say, the family ID as another column, and then you can start to have a list of graph edges. So this node supersedes node ID 4. This node relates to node ID 7. You know, so however you would store a graph when you like crack open your computer science textbook, that's what I'm doing.
Every single like logs of your conversation, everything, it will be back into a node specifically.
Not quite, because you want to have compression take place, right? Because let's say that I have 1,000 messages, there's going to be a lot of different things that are related and should be compressed and consolidated, right? So let's say I have like the chat log, right? It's this big and there's no connections between anything. I want the thing that I want to be searching on a regular basis, I want it to be this big and have a whole bunch of different connections so it's easy to like hop through the graph and traverse it. Cool. Any other questions? All right, cool. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you guys for coming and dealing with our AC issues. I know it's super hot in here. have a few more beverages that are left. Feel free to come, hang out, chat. We're gonna play some music, and it's stay for another 30 plus or so minutes. We'd love to chat with you guys, and thanks for coming.